Sergeant Leonardo, you may do the cloud recording.
Cloud is going.
All right, Sergeant Polite, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the remote hearing on landmarks, public sightings, and dispositions. Will all members and staff please turn on their videos at this time? Again, will all members and staff please turn on their videos at this time? Thank you. To minimize disruptions, please place all cell phones and electronics to vibrate. You may send your testimony at landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that's landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Good afternoon. I'm Councilmember Adrienne Adams, Chair of the Subcommittee on Landmarks, Public Sightings, and Dispositions. I'm joined remotely today by Council Members Koo, Barron, and Schrager. Today we will be voting on LU 688, the 505 West to 134th Street cluster. The subcommittee held a public hearing on this item on October 8th. Today we will also hold a public hearing on the public siting of a Department of Sanitation garage and salt shed facility in Queens. Before we begin, I recognize the subcommittee counsel to review today's hearing procedures.
Thank you, Chair Adams. I am Jeffrey Campagna, counsel to this subcommittee. Members of the public who wish to testify were asked to register for today's hearing. If you wish to testify and have not registered, please go to www.council.nyc.gov to sign up now. If you are a member of the public who wants to watch this hearing, please watch the hearing on the New York City Council website. All people testifying before the subcommittee will be on mute until they are recognized by the chair to testify. When the chair recognizes you, your mic will be unmuted. Please confirm that your mic is unmuted before you begin speaking. Public testimony will be limited to 2 minutes per witness. If you have additional testimony or written testimony you would like to submit to the subcommittee to consider, please submit it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Please your number or project name in the subject line of the email. During the hearing, council members who would like to ask questions should use the Zoom raise hand function. The raise hand button should appear at the bottom of the participant panel. I will announce council members who have questions in the order that they raise their hands. Chair Adams will then recognize members to speak. Witnesses are reminded to remain in the meeting until they are excused by the chair. Council members may have questions. Lastly, there may be extended pauses if we encounter technical problems. We ask that you please be patient as we work through these issues. Chair Adams will now continue with today's agenda items.
Thank you, Councilor. We've also been joined by Councilmember Acosta Constantinides. We will now vote to approve preconsidered LU 688, the 505 West 134th Street cluster. This application was submitted by HPD pursuant to Article 16 of the General Municipal Law and Article 11 of the Private Housing Finance Law, requesting the approval of an urban development action area project, waiver of the designation requirements of sections 197-C and 197-D of the Charter, and an exemption from real property taxes for 3 city-owned 5-story residential buildings located at 505, 523, and 527 West 134th Street, Borough of Manhattan, together called the 505 West 134th Street Cluster in Council District 7, which is represented by Councilmember Levine. This application will facilitate the preservation of 69 units of affordable home ownership. Council, please call the roll.
The subcommittee will now vote to approve LU 688. Adams.
I vote aye.
Koo.
I vote aye.
Barron.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to thank the chair and the staff because I did have several questions when this item was up at our hearing, and those questions were answered. And I think this is a great opportunity for people to be able to have home ownership at a reasonable rate, and those who are being challenged will in fact be assisted in getting Section 8. So I vote aye on this project. Thank you very much.
Schrager.
I vote aye.
By a vote of 4 in the affirmative with 0 in the negative and 0 abstentions, the item is approved and recommended for referral to the full Land Use Committee. However, the vote is held open.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. We now move on to today's public hearing on LU 691 relating to the DSNY Queens Sanitation Garage 1. This application was submitted by the Department of Sanitation and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services pursuant to Section 197-C of the Charter for the site selection and acquisition of property for a sanitation garage and salt shed facility to be located at 31-11 20th Avenue and 19th Avenue in Queens Community District 1 in the council district represented by Councilmember Constantinides. The existing DSNY facility is located in Councilmember Van Bramer's district. We are joined or will be joined by both members today. I now recognize Councilmember Constantinides to offer an opening statement.
Hi, good afternoon. Chair Adams, thank you so much for the opportunity to address the committee today, and thank you to my colleagues for allowing me to speak as well. I hope everyone's staying safe. The garage on 21st Street has been situated next to public housing for a generation, and it has gone on way too long. This is an environmental justice crisis. And the fact that we're able to move this sanitation garage, which has been an EJ contributor for so long, and finally move it to a location that is industrial, that is safe, and that will allow for still Community Board 1 to get plowed and have the sanitation services that they need is a big win for our community. However, there are some things that still need to happen. They're moving the garage to Northern Astoria. The waterfront there is in desperate need of revitalization. We've had conversations with the administration around the need to finally let Leicester Creek become a living water body again. It's been a brownfield for way too long. There was a visioning session 10 years ago for it to become a kayak launch. Well, right now, if you put a kayak in that particular water body, it would melt. So we would need to make sure that as part of this, that we're on a path to revitalizing Leicester Creek. In addition, we've talked to the sanitation department and the administration around upgrades to Northern Astoria where the sanitation garage are going. I recognize the deep financial hardship that the city is going through, but I also recognize that in community benefit agreements, in good times and bad times, are not out of the question. I was a staffer prior to being a council member. I was here for lots of bad budgets where we still were able to do community benefit agreements. There needs to be a revitalization of some of the playgrounds in the areas around Northern Astoria to ensure that the community there is getting what they need. But also looking at 21st Street. And we need Department of Transportation to come through, and look at and really take a hard look at 21st Street and ensure that 21st Street is, reimagined in the manner in which we hoped for so long. This removal of the sanitation garage gives us an opportunity to reimagine the street, and also gives us an opportunity to reimagine the site in which this garage has stood for the last generations. We need to have public use for public land. This land cannot end up in the hands of developers. This land needs to be affordable housing. This land needs to be something, and truly affordable housing. Truly affordable, not AMIs that are beyond the neighborhood, but really integrated into the community. There's been a robust process in the Community Land Trust of Western Queens and the Ravenswood Tenants Association, and many residents on 21st Street in and around there have had a robust process already to reimagine this site. We need to continue with that, and we need to guarantee this council, we may be term limited out. I know my colleague, I'm working closely with Councilmember Van Bramer on this. We may not be council members when this garage gets torn down and something happens there. However, we need to ensure the legacy on 21st Street is not one where the city can sell this property in the long term and ends up being a private development. This needs to ensure that we have public land for public use, preferably with a land trust. I look forward to working with HPD on all of these issues to ensure that the new site and the areas around it are giving the love that they need while we reimagine 21st Street and ensure real community participation and a reimagining of 21st Street in and around where this garage has stood. So I thank you again, Chair Adams, for your partnership. I look forward to my continued partnership with the administration on this and with Councilmember Van Bramer as we ensure the legacy here moving forward is not one that we look back on 10 years from now and are ashamed of, but one that we are proud that this garage finally moved away from public housing and that we put something and guaranteed something for our community to have a long-lasting impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. So glad you're here today. I now recognize Council Member Van Bramer to offer remarks.
Thank you very much, Chair Adams, for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to Councilmember Constantinides for all the work that he has been doing and for the exemplary example that he set in working with us to cite a new depot in his district. I represent the Ravenswood community and have for 11 years, but for decades, the existing 1939 outdated sanitation depot has been a source of real problems for the local community. It's an environmental justice issue, it's a racial justice issue, and it's a public housing justice issue for me. And I know that Carol Wilkins, our president of the Ravenswood Residents Association, and generations before her have fought to move this depot and to bring some justice to the local community. For decades, garbage trucks have parked, double and triple parked, all over the sidewalks and the streets surrounding the Ravenswood houses. The stench has been awful. It's been dangerous for the residents, and they have been fighting this fight for a long time. It is certainly not the Department of Sanitation's fault that a depot was built there in 1939, but it has been way past time for the site to be retired. And so it is a great development that a new state-of-the-art facility will be built in Western Queens. It is also a great development that this site will be retired. And as Councilmember Constantinides was just saying, what happens to the site now is of incredible importance. And I share Councilmember Constantinides' vision that this is public land that must be for public use, that must be for the people of the local community. It cannot be sold to private developers. We cannot have luxury housing. We must see what the community envisions for itself be built one day on this site, even if we are no longer the council members representing this particular portion of our district. So want to say what a great success story this is, a long time coming for so many people in Ravenswood and Queensview. The borderline of our districts, it runs right through this. And so I just wanted to be here, weigh in, and share Councilmember Constantinides' vision for what happens in the future, which I believe follows the community's vision, and making certain that this land isn't sold to private developers, that we do not see market rate housing here, that we see public land for public use, and the people in this community who have suffered for so long are rewarded with their fight, with the site being made into what they want it to be. With that, I thank Councilmember Constantinides and especially the chair for allowing me the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Van Bramer, for being here. Really, really appreciate the presence of both of you to offer your remarks. I concur with both of you and your vision for that location as well. So thank you again for being here. Really, really appreciate that. Council, please call the applicant panel.
Chair Adams. My connection dropped for a second, so I missed the last piece.
Nope, you're fine, Jeff. Just need for you to call the applicant panel.
Very good. The applicant panel for the Department of Sanitation and DCAS is Gregory Anderson, Steve Bradagam, Arlana Davis, and Jason Ortiz.
Okay, if everyone is in, Council, please administer the affirmation.
Panelists, please raise your right hands. Please turn on your video. And please raise your right hands and state your names.
Ricky Ng.
Gregory Anderson.
Stephen Bradigan. Stephen Bradigan.
Alana Davis.
Jason Ortiz.
Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this subcommittee and an answer to all council member questions.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you very much. You may begin, but I ask that whoever is speaking that you please state your name once again for the record. You may begin.
Great. And is there a way we can pull the presentation up as well? Aha. Great. Good afternoon, Chair Adams. I'm Gregory Anderson, Assistant Commissioner for Policy and External Affairs at the Department of Sanitation. Also, good afternoon to Councilmember Constantinides, Councilmember Van Bramer, and the members of the Subcommittee on Landmarks, Public Siting, and Dispositions. I'm joined here today by Steve Bradagam, Assistant Commissioner for Environmental Affairs at the Department of Sanitation, Arlana Davis, Assistant Commissioner for Real Estate, and Ricky Ng, Administrative Architect at DSNY. And we're also joined by Jason Ortiz, Assistant Director for Real Estate Services at DCAS. Thank you for your opportunity to testify on the proposed relocation of the department's Queens West 1 sanitation garage and salt shed to 31-11 20th Avenue, also known as the Loyster Creek site in Queens Community District 1. At DSNY, our mission is to keep New York City healthy, safe, and clean by collecting, recycling, and disposing of waste, cleaning streets and vacant lots, and clearing snow and ice. And to accomplish this mission, like the department, like the police department and fire departments, relies on a network of district garages embedded in our city's communities. And each of our 59 districts are coterminous with the 59 community districts across the 5 boroughs. And as we've learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, sanitation services are critical to the health and well-being of our city. The men and women who work at this department are among the most essential workers we have in our city, and we have an obligation to provide them with clean, safe, and appropriate facilities. If you could go to slide 2. So DSNY's current District 1 garage, as the council members mentioned, is located at 3428 21st Street in Astoria. It's undersized and structurally deficient. The garage consists of approximately 37,000 square foot building built in 1931 on a 62,000 square foot lot. It's much smaller than our average district sanitation garage, which is around 80,000 square feet of combined indoor and outdoor space for personnel and equipment parking. And this facility simply is already overtaxed and will not be able to meet the needs of a growing community in Western Queens. To accommodate our operations, we already use a small 1 acre overflow parking lot located about 2 miles away, adjacent to the proposed site of the new Queens District 1 garage. And this project also includes the relocation of a salt lot from the bed of an unbuilt street on 43rd Avenue, west of Vernon Boulevard along the East River. The current sanitation garage is old, it's outdated, and far too small to properly serve our employees and the surrounding community. And previously, the size of the rear yard forced DSNY to park more than a dozen trucks on 21st Street and 35th Avenue. This was regularly a frustration to surrounding neighbors. It was, something that we at sanitation struggled with, and luckily we were able to eliminate the on-street parking several years ago by acquiring the overflow parking lot adjacent to Oyster Creek. But there's no guarantee that we will be able to continue using that site for the long term. So if we were to lose that auxiliary parking, we would be forced to return those trucks to the streets of this community, which is something that no one wants to see. Next slide. So the current facility, as I mentioned, is in increasingly poor structural condition. These photos illustrate some of the structural issues at the garage. I want to assure everyone that we have taken steps to keep the facility safe for our employees. We've added reinforcement to the facade. We've done some additional work, but these are interim measures that will not suffice in the long term. And a full rehabilitation of the garage would be very costly and would certainly disrupt operations and services to the surrounding community. As we are forced to take additional interim measures to ensure the safety of the facility, it's likely that less and less of the floor area and rear yard will be usable for operations, as we have to cordon off space where the roof is unstable, et cetera, and that would further limit our flexibility and effectiveness. Next slide. And so I think this really illustrates what council members Constantinides and Van Bramer mentioned earlier. The garage is currently sited in the R5 zone, and it's a non-conforming use, obviously. When it opened in 1931, none of these adjacent uses existed. It was in a relatively undeveloped part of Astoria. And with the development of Western Queens over the past century, particularly the Ravenswood houses in the 1950s, this use has become totally incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And today, the garage is surrounded on all 4 sides by public housing and playgrounds, and is just a block away from the Queensview Co-op in Councilmember Constantinides' district. And particularly because of the small size, cramped quarters, and unenclosed parking area, this facility has been the subject of a number of community complaints regarding safety, noise, air emissions, and odors. And by vacating this property upon the successful completion of the new Queens Community District 1 garage, we have the opportunity to pursue a community-driven conversation about potential redevelopment for a more appropriate and suitable use on this site. Next slide. So now turning to the proposed project, DSNY and DCAS seek to acquire approximately 9.8 acres of undeveloped industrial property, as well as easements for vehicular and utility access, adjacent to Loyster Creek in the Astoria Industrial Business Zone, which is also located in Community District 1. The proposed project area includes Block 826, Lot 42, and part of Block 850, Lot 350, and would facilitate the development of an approximately 94,000 square foot sanitation garage and a 20,000 square foot salt shed. The proposed site is surrounded on 3 sides by industrial uses, including the expansive Con Ed facility and related energy facilities north of 20th Avenue. And the site is ideally suited for a sanitation garage. It is located far away from the nearest residential uses, provides adequate space for on-site parking of all of the equipment that would be dispatched from this location, as well as salt storage. And the project provides DSNY's Queens District 1 workforce with a proper facility of adequate size to store and maintain equipment, provide personnel support space, men's and women's locker rooms, and enable DSNY to continue providing this community district with refuse, recycling, hopefully one day organics collection, cleaning, and winter emergency service. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is a slightly closer view of the site plan that shows that the north is to the right-hand side of this photo, shows the location of the garage on the far northern side of the parcel, furthest away from the nearest residential use, which is on the far left side of this photograph. Also shows the entrance driveway coming off of 19th Avenue. There is a driveway illustrated here going to 20th Avenue. That's for emergency use only, and also for utility easement. So all of the access to and from the site would be off of 19th Avenue. That's something that the community has made very clear that there is a priority for them, and we fully intend to keep that. Next slide. So this just shows another view of the proposed facility, again showing that it is set back in the far northern part of the property, and really shows the surrounding uses very well. To the west, you have a large yard used for Con Ed for storage and all sorts of different things. You have energy generation to the east, to the north. You have fossil fuel storage to the north. So really, can't think of a better place to put a sanitation garage than an industrial neighborhood like this. Next slide. So the proposed garage would incorporate state-of-the-art energy efficiency and environmental features, incorporate sustainable design features, including low-flow water fixtures, recycled materials, and particularly, as you can see in this image, rooftop solar panels that can provide 390 kilowatts of electricity. That would be enough for pretty much all of the facility's lighting needs, potentially some other needs as well. It would feature advanced stormwater collection, storage, and treatment system, preventing direct runoff from the site into Loyster Creek. That's illustrated here by the yellowish oval in the foreground. And really, I think what we're committed to there is, by putting another industrial use along this water body, we don't want to contribute to the further degradation of the water body, and in fact, actually help clean it up and discharge only clean water into the creek. And we would pursue at least LEED Silver accreditation as we're required to, similar to our other recently completed facilities. And if anyone's been to the Spring Street garage, for example, on the west side of Manhattan, you can really see what a modern sanitation facility looks like. It is so unbelievably different from what the 21st Street garage looks like. Green roof, modern facilities for our employees, windows, which shockingly most of our older facilities don't have, but it's really important for the well-being of our employees to have those kinds of accommodations. Next slide. And one more, actually. As the site does directly abut Leicester Creek, the proposed site layout and design accommodates the potential for future public waterfront access. At this time, given the city's dire financial situation related to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's not in scope for us to build out this waterfront esplanade as part of this project. However, we plan to design the project to not only accommodate, but also embrace that proposed development in the future. We understand the community's desire to improve access to the waterfront. This is a part of Western Queens that desperately needs access to its waterfront. It has been blocked off for far too long by energy generation and industrial uses and wastewater treatment plants and airports and all other sorts of things. And we we firmly are committed to advancing this in the future. And we look forward to working with members of the community, with some surrounding proposed developments that are in the works to really pursue this goal in the future. Next slide. So this is an image that shows what the shoreline of Loyster Creek looks like in the vicinity of the proposed garage today. And the next slide shows what we'd envision it to look like in the future. So a nice walking path, vegetation, landscaping, potential for some seating areas, a pavilion, you know, definitely a passive space, but one where community members really could interact with the waterfront. As Councilmember Constantinides mentioned, I think there's definitely a need to do some work on the water body itself before we could put in a kayak launch, but definitely open to something like that as well in the future. Next slide. So just to wrap up here, DSNY also conducted a detailed environmental review for this application. We found that the facility will not have any significant adverse traffic, noise, air, or odor impacts. And in fact, we're really proud that we have state-of-the-art trucks. We use ultra-low sulfur B20 biodiesel fuel. We have advanced particulate filters, emissions controls, and we really have one of the cleanest heavy-duty fleets in the country. We're also in the process of testing one of the nation's first fully electric garbage trucks, and hope to expand that program as those become more cost-effective in the future. Since we started pursuing the site, we've met numerous times with local elected officials, community board members, civic leaders, and they've unanimously expressed support for the goal of moving the garage from its current site. And we strongly believe that the proposed site at Loyster Creek is the best place for this garage to move. This new state-of-the-art facility will ensure that we are able to provide efficient, high-quality sanitation services to Community District 1 well into the future. Thank you for your consideration today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I do have a few questions, but I will defer to my colleagues first. And I do see that Councilmember Constantinides has a question.
Thank you, Chair Adams. Can I have more than one?
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's always good to see you, Chair Adams. Thank you. So I have a number of questions for sanitation. So number one, you already covered sort of the issues around Loyster Creek. How long do you think the remediation of the water body would take? What do you believe? How do you think it'll improve the resiliency of Northern Astoria? Because when you improve a wetland, you also improve resiliency. So what are our thoughts around resiliency and improving this water body in the long term, and how long would that take?
Thank you, Councilmember, for that question. I think this is the full-fledged revitalization of this water body is something that definitely needs more investigation, more planning, and I think we'd have to bring in our partners at the Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of the Mayor's Office of Resiliency to really fully answer those. I know there is a CSO outfall, for example, at the head of the creek. And so part of their work to reduce CSOs citywide, I think would go into revitalizing this water body. But we are certainly, and I know this is something that we talked about when we met a few weeks ago, but we're certainly committed to working with those agencies to figure out what the long-term plan could be.
And what do we put into language here to ensure that it happens, right? Because again, you'll be here, Greg, and you've done a great job and been a great assistant commissioner for a long time. But I have a colleague, a friend here in Western Queens, who said if it's not ink, it stinks. Bishop Taylor from Urban Upbound, and what can we put in ink to ensure that once this mayor, moves to to the next thing and whatever happens, and I move on to not being a councilor anymore, that this doesn't become an empty promise to the community, but this actually, is go and become a revitalized water body. And I'm going to harp on this like guarantee language a lot in my questions today, because I just don't want there to be promises. You know, it's like I really wanted, well, I don't want to say this anymore because after COVID, I lost all the weight. Now I want it back. But I can like hope to lose 20 pounds. But, you know, unless I'm actually doing something about it, it's just like a nice dream. So how do we make sure these aren't just dreams, but actually like things that are going to be coming to reality?
Yeah, I absolutely understand where you're coming from there, particularly given, you know, the timing and, you know, the term elapsing in 13, 14 short months. So, you know, I think those conversations are still in the works. There are some things that we've talked about that I think are much clearer in terms of a firm commitment. Something like the long-term revitalization of Leicester Creek is a little bit more complicated and one where really there's a lot of overlapping stakeholders. You know, I'm sure that some of the impairment to this water body was caused by Con Ed and other, you know, industrial uses that can take a long time to sort of work through. So I think what we're really committed to is bringing the agencies together, potentially bringing private stakeholders together as well, and exploring what that timeline would look like. And, you know, for our site in particular, we're planning to do all of the remediation that's necessary. We're planning to restore the shoreline and make it more resilient. You know, bring back native plantings, for example, rather than, you know, these invasive weeds that are growing there now. So I think, you know, those are things that we can do very quickly on our time frame, and then there are other things that you know have a longer sort of discussion that's necessary.
Now, can you go back really quickly to your slide? I know there's lot 350 that you talked about. If you can put that back up while we're talking, if that's possible.
I don't know who controls that.
Or maybe it's not.
Ryan, could you put the slides back up?
I apologize for that. I just want to make sure, as I'm talking this through, I want to make sure that we're all sort of seeing the same thing.
Yeah, the slide with the site plan, is that the one you're looking for?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think it's the sixth slide, sixth page.
Keep going. There you go. Almost.
There we go.
Okay, so in that lot 350 that adjoins, that's also going to be used, as you said, you're taking part of that lot as well?
So we would be using the access drive and utility easement that are both laid out here. The remainder of that site is not part of this proposal, and it's a privately owned property at this point.
Okay. So on the property we do have, I do see that there's solar that's going to be installed on top of the garage, correct?
Correct.
How much of the garage will it power?
So it's 390 kilowatts of solar. It is sufficient for most of the on-site lighting requirements, which is the biggest component of electricity use on-site.
Okay. Have we thought about installing a battery on this site and you know, to facilitate more renewable energy as we think about the future of Rikers Island and the possibility of renewable Rikers, the opportunities for wind energy to plug into Astoria, the opportunities for, you know, creating, you know, right now we create 55% of the city's power. If for that to, you know, we don't want that to continue unless it's renewable power. So is there a possibility here of building battery storage on this site to help facilitate the storage and facilitation of renewable energy here in Western Queens?
So on the sanitation part of the site, just to be frank, probably not, because we have programmed it to try to take the smallest footprint necessary for our operations. Okay. I think there's clearly an opportunity on the rest of the site. We'd be happy to live next to a battery storage facility or I think wind power might be a little complicated by the nearby airport, but on
Well, I
the
mean, they want to
energy,
plug in. They'd be out
Yeah.
in the ocean, but they want to plug in here, right?
yeah, I think we as sanitation would be happy to think through those possible uses, but it is a private site and one for which we will not have control.
And for the solar, do we envision children from the local community once COVID is over and this thing is built, coming to learn about renewable energy and solar, how this garage works, and so on, composting, organics, all of that? We sort of facilitate this site as potential for some of the local schools to take an opportunity for them to educate them about what's going on there.
Yeah, I think we have to obviously balance the operational needs of the site with public access, but we've been one of the most popular partners for Open House New York, for example, where we every year open up our marine transfer stations, our garages, our central repair shop to public access. I think that's the kind of thing that we can certainly pursue on a limited basis. I don't know that we should that we can have school-aged kids coming in here, every day, but to sort of,
there aren't that many schools, there aren't that many schools.
Sure.
I don't think we look at every, but the occasional school trip. I mean, we want them in the classroom learning, when remote learning is over. But we would definitely want the opportunity to have them learn about renewable energy in a safe environment.
Of course.
And then on 21st Street, I think we've talked about the reimagining of the street, making it a more traffic safety, pedestrian friendly area. I mean, we've had the trucks there for generations. I know Councilmember Bremer talked about it since 1951. There was the idea of the BQX that is now not as possible. And I think this gives us a real opportunity to reimagine this street. And we have commitments from DOT. I hope to sort of take a hard look at that, correct?
Yeah, I think we still have to finalize the exact language of the commitments, but I know that DOT is open to looking at 21st Street. I know that that's been a priority corridor of theirs for years. I, as a fellow Western Queens resident, although not your constituent, understand that there's a real need there. I've been to that garage probably a dozen times, and it is a very busy, very car-focused street, and I'm confident we can get to a place with DOT where you're comfortable with what the commitment is.
Yeah, because early in my term, they did a study. There were 2,000 cars an hour, cars and trucks on that road. 24 hours a day. That's a really sort of staggering average. And it shouldn't be dangerous to cross the street in your own community. It shouldn't be dangerous to get milk.
Yeah.
And then lastly, looking at our commitments around the affordable housing. I know we've been going back and forth today with language, but I definitely want to make sure, as Councilmember Bramer talked about, this needs to be a site for the community. Again, how do we envision an agreement that is ironclad? I hear often we don't want to hamstring the next administration. Yes, I want to hamstring the next administration here and ensure that this cannot be a site for sale, a site that becomes luxury housing, a site that becomes something that 20 years from now we're embarrassed that we were a part of, but something that leaves a real legacy that the community was heard and that they had the option to get what they need. Now, I don't represent the site, but I can throw a ball across the street and hit it. My 11-year-old, who's a baseball player, can do a better job throwing the ball across the street and hitting it. But I want to make sure that that we're in tandem here, as Councilmember Bramer talked about, that this is a guarantee for the community there's going to be public land for public use.
Yeah, I think your point is very well heard there, and as you mentioned, language is in the works. We are optimistic we can get to a place that we're all comfortable with. So, I can't speak for HPD themselves, but I know that they're very committed to both community process and making some sort of firm commitment in the longer term.
I think it's the last question I have, and thank you, Chair Adams, for indulging me here. You know, in and around the area, there are always community benefit agreements, right? Whenever we move a sanitation garage, there needs to be something. There are always things that the community are improvements that are made. There are several parks in the stone's throw away from this facility that haven't been renovated since the 1990s, which feels like 10 years ago, but really it's more like 25 years ago. These parks where children play, they're the same ones that are going to see these sanitation trucks go through their community. We all want to make sure that there's a good neighborhood feel here. How do we navigate this? I know we're in a very difficult financial situation, but we also need to recognize that the community still needs upgrades in and around the facility to ensure that the community continues to thrive and be a place where families want to locate, and that that it's still an inviting community, and it's not just industrial. So three sides may be industrial, but the other side of 20th Avenue are ball fields and parks and houses where people live and play and raise their families. So how do we ensure that they're still getting something that is going to benefit the community in the long term?
So that's one, as we've discussed before, I think the financial situation is a little bit different than where we were when we started this project. And when we first had conversations about this land use action, probably over a year ago. So I think it will be a challenge, but I know those conversations are ongoing, and I think you have made your demand clear, and I think we have to keep discussing that going forward.
All right. Well, I definitely, as Yogi Berra once said, it's getting late early. So we're running out of time. We all want to make sure that this, as Councilmember Brammer talked about, and I talked about earlier, this is an environmental justice issue. This is a racial justice issue. Getting this garage moved is so very important. But getting it right, getting 21st Street right, getting public land for public use, getting the streetscape on 21st Street right, getting the resiliency and Lights for Creek right, getting the surrounding area around the garage right, making sure that they're only entering on 19th Avenue. All of these things are going to make for a better Western Queens community, and a community that we all are going to be thrilled to continue to live in for the long term. So I'm looking forward to everyone's continued partnership here to make sure that all these things are put into language that guarantee it, because it's not just about my term or Councilmember Brammer's term, but it's about what we all leave behind, right? We're in these jobs for a very small period of time, and we want to guarantee to our constituents that we left a legacy that we can be proud of, and not one of uncertainty and one that's a mess. And that's where I'm coming from, that my constituents know that we left behind something that's fair and equitable and to benefit the community in the long term.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Thank you very much. I'm going to note at this time that we've been joined by Councilmember Miller, and we will now go over to Councilmember Van Bramer for his questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to say to Mr. Anderson and all of those folks, and to the chair and Councilmember Constantinides, that this is a remarkably complicated move, in the sense that we are decommissioning a sanitation depot and salt lot on the edge of my district into phasing into a brand new state-of-the-art facility in Councilmember Constantinides' district. But I want to just go back, because I really believe it was the people, the leadership, and the community at the Ravenswood houses that drove this issue into the forefront of the public consciousness, and encourage this administration to take very seriously the environmental concerns and the negative impacts that the existing depot was having on the Ravenswood houses. And I have to give credit where credit is due, because Carol Wilkins, who's the president of our Ravenswood Houses Association, several years ago, there was a big snowstorm, blizzard, and Mayor de Blasio came to the Ravenswood houses to check on the snow removal. And Carol and I met him in 20 inches of snow, and we took a look at the snow removal, but then Carol Wilkins pulled the mayor over and said, I want you to see the sanitation depot, and I want you to see the garbage trucks that are parked in the street. And while this is during a blizzard, I want you to know that when it's summertime and all of the children in our community are in the ball fields, the basketball court, and the park that surrounds the sanitation depot, they are breathing in the stench and the fumes from the garbage trucks while trying to cross the street through double and triple parked garbage trucks. So all credit to the Ravenswood community for fighting for decades and never giving up on this particular issue. And credit to the administration for taking it seriously, and to my colleague, Councilmember Constantinides, for stepping up. And when they found a site in his district, he made the administration make and create the best, most sustainable, most beautiful depot and salt lot that they could ever create. I do want to go back to, because it's in my district, the disposition of the existing depot, and I know that there are discussions with DOT and HPD, but I too am concerned that we haven't seen the details of those promises. And again, I agree with Councilmember Constantinides that we need more than promises. So this is partly a question to Greg Anderson, but also to DCAS, who I believe is here represented, on the process of decommissioning the site. Obviously, there will be some years where the new facility will need to be constructed, and then the new facility will be constructed and our existing site will be torn down. But first, to Greg, if you can share some more information on the promises and the documents that are going back and forth on what's being promised. And second, if DCAS could talk a little bit about the process of decommissioning the site and how DCAS will handle that ultimate disposition of the 21st Street site. And then also the salt lot off of Vernon, that is that is being used today. What will be the disposition of that, since you're using that as a part of the existing situation, but assume that will fold into the new facility, Leicester Creek. So what becomes of the salt lot?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember. So as far as the existing garage site, I know there actually has already been a community-driven, very grassroots visioning effort for that site. We've been a part of it. We attended the last meeting that they had on site, literally outside the garage.
I was there.
Across the street.
Yep.
Nick from our office was there. You know Nick well.
I saw him.
HPD also attended that. We're very committed to being a part of that process. Obviously don't want to hijack the process in any way, but very committed to being part of it. And, the language that I think the mayor's office has been working on with HPD, I think at least is a good first effort at trying to get to, what you and Councilmember Constantinides are looking for in terms of a real commitment to this site, and particularly to the development of affordable housing on the site, truly affordable housing. So I know because HPD is also involved in that conversation, I don't want to speak for them and their sort of process, but I know that that's something that we're very committed to having a thorough conversation on with both you and with Councilmember Constantinides over the coming days, and hopefully not more than a week or so, because we know that it is a linchpin issue for this project. And as far as before I hand it over to Jason from DCAS, the existing salt lot is actually in the mapped but unbuilt roadbed of 43rd Avenue, west of Vernon Boulevard, adjacent to the East River, just north of the Con Ed Training Center. You're familiar with it. Also, just south of the proposed Silver Cup West development. I'm not an expert on that one, just a local resident that happens to read about it in the blogs. But I know there are some factors there, and Arlana, I don't know if you want to jump in with that site, but our intention would be to relinquish that mapped but unbuilt street upon the completion of this salt shed. So there she is.
Solana, basically when sanitation vacates a site such as Vernon Boulevard and the Q1 garage, we would relinquish the site to DCAS for further disposition. What we've done in the case of Manhattan, we formulated a task force with representatives from the community and sanitation and any stakeholders to discuss what the potential for that site could be. And recommendations are forwarded to DCAS, and a determination can be made by all the stakeholders as to the best use of the site. In particular with Vernon Boulevard, we'll definitely relinquish that site. And DOT and I believe DEP have some potential plans for the site.
Can you just please, I don't mean to interrupt, can you just state your name and your affiliation for the record?
I'm sorry, Alana Davis, Assistant Commissioner of Real Estate at the Department of Sanitation.
Thank you.
So just to go back, and I know Greg knows this, being a Long Island City resident, and I would stay off all those blogs, Mr. Anderson, but
I can't help myself.
But I just want to hone in a little bit on the salt lot, because as Greg well knows, that is one of the most valuable pieces of land in New York City. It is right there on the waterfront, and so I believe I just heard that DEP and DOT may have an interest in that site. But I would have great concern about that site going to a private developer, and I mean, my goodness, it's worth tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, given where it's situated. And as you referenced, Greg, the Silver Cup West project, which has been long contemplated but not actually implemented. But there is the ability, even without land use action, to build incredibly large towers there. So when we say that DEP and DOT have an interest, and DCAS will ultimately dispose of that site, can someone share a little bit more insight as to what that's going to look like, what that process is going to be. I know there was some reference to community input, but to my knowledge, there really hasn't been any discussion about that particular site with the community board, elected officials.
So for that site in particular, I know from my past history at DEP that there is a substantial regulator under there, which is part of our sewer system and the interceptor sewers, as well as the CSO outfall. So I don't know that there's really much development potential for the site because there is this ongoing DEP interest in obviously maintaining and protecting their infrastructure. I think this is something we can certainly get more information on from our fellow agencies and come back to you with, council member. But I don't think that at this point that the city intends in any way, shape, or form to pursue development right now. I mean, there's nothing contemplated. There's nothing on the table. So I think if this is something that you want resolution on in the coming weeks before this action moves forward, we're happy to explore that further.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that and your knowledge of what's underneath that land. But I would appreciate some clarification on it, just because, as you know, a billionaire who wanted to, let's say, have an interest in that area and develop that land, someone with incredible resources might be able to spend some money and get around some of those below ground issues that you spoke of, if it meant that in the end they were able to build substantial luxury housing and 70-story towers, which is potentially contemplated just a few feet to the north, as you mentioned, in Silver Cup West. So would want to be sure that that's not only in this administration's plans, because obviously the mayor also has 13 or 14 months left, that a future administration would be bound by whatever agreements are going to be made here. And once again, I know that because I was at that last visioning session at Ravenswood, and the Western Queens Community Land Trust helped run the meeting, and I know all the agencies were there to hear. But again, I just want to say that the Ravenswood community, and I know you know this, Greg, but the Ravenswood community has borne the brunt of this for decades, and it is very much an issue of racial justice. In my first year as a council member, I sponsored a basketball tournament in the basketball courts that are right next to the garbage depot. Went out. We were so proud of that event, and all the kids got jerseys, and we were playing basketball. But it was a warm summer day, and as all of these beautiful children were playing basketball, as a brand new council member, the stench from the depot filled the basketball courts, and I thought, how are we doing this, right? How can we do this? And so whatever agreements get made here, they have to center the Ravenswood community, right? The Black and Brown people who have lived with this for the last 50, 60 years, and who fought, right? That's why I believe all of this is being done. It's why all of us are here today, is because the people of Ravenswood kept at it, kept fighting. Carol Wilkins dragged the mayor over to the depot in a blizzard. Yes, former Commissioner Garcia obviously was there multiple times with me as well. But, I'm very interested in the final language, because the people of Ravenswood have got to be centered. And justice for the people of Ravenswood has got to be centered in any agreement. Moving this depot is already a very substantial victory for the people of Ravenswood. And justice being delivered. But in this agreement and the future disposition of the 21st Street site is where the real justice will occur. Do you want to add anything to that, Greg?
No, I think your point is well made, and I think we will take that that spirit back to the conversations that we have with our sister agencies, with you, with Councilmember Constantinides, with others at the City Council. So I think very, very much heard, and we certainly, I know, speaking for former Commissioner Garcia, at least I can't speak for the mayor, but I know that she certainly, from conversations with Ravenswood tenants, with conversations with you, with Assemblymember Nolan, with so many other local community members, that this was a project that had to happen, or at least moving the garage from that site had to happen. And we're I think we all would have liked to have been at this point in the process a little bit sooner than we are now. But that's unfortunately the reality of land use and acquiring private land as a government agency. But we desperately want this to move forward, and we acknowledge and appreciate and really commend the Ravenswood residents and the community activists for fighting for this kind of justice. So.
Thank you. I know you're a constituent of mine as well, so thank you for choosing the greatest council district in New York as your home. Thank you very much, Chair Adams, for giving me the opportunity to speak and ask these questions. And of course, I know that you too care and love for the people of Ravenswood as well, and bringing justice to these very, very good folks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Your testimony is always very compelling, so thank you so much. I just have one question before we go on and see if any other council members have questions. Is this project still expected to be completed by 2023?
So right now, the construction funding is in fiscal year 2023, so that's when we anticipate the project would start. That was true before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so obviously this land use process has been delayed about 6 months because of that. I think it's possible that the construction could slip a year or so from that timeframe. We also do still have to finalize the acquisition with the private landlord. So that's something that still has to be finished before we can start the design and construction process. But it is a few years away at minimum.
Okay, and when is the current site expected to close?
So on that time frame, if we started construction in realistically calendar 24, it's usually around 2 years to build a sanitation garage. So sometime around calendar year 26.
Okay, all right, thank you. Council, are there any other council member questions?
Councilmember Miller has a question. However, I would recommend at this time we also
Good afternoon, Chair Adams. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Councilmember Miller, before you ask your question, we're going to, our vote is still open. We'd like to do that first. I think that you're the lone wolf for pre-considered LU 688. The vote's still open. So I'm going to hand it back over to council. Then we're going to take your questions.
Okay.
LU 688, 505 West 134th Street. Councilmember Miller, how do you vote?
Vote aye.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, with 0 abstentions. The item is recommended for full approval to the full Land Use Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Councilmember Miller, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you, Chair Adams. So I do have just a few questions about the upgrade and the new facility, the SNY facility, which is obviously sorely needed. I know what it is to have antiquated facilities that don't provide adequate service or service that really meets the needs and the capacities of the new and emergency communities. We have that in the Jamaica area. Even more importantly, how we manage sanitation waste transfer has been a major issue in the Jamaica area as well. So I have a few questions along that line. But I first want to say, on behalf of myself, my family, that have resided in the Ravenswood houses for more than 40 years, and had experienced the neighbor, not the not so friendly neighbor, through no fault of their own, of DSNY, that they certainly deserve more. And I've heard my colleagues kind of articulate the woes, and having seen those and having honestly used that facility as a playground, those are the kind of things that happen in these communities. And so we do certainly deserve better. But as we transition out, I would hope that any new project comes that really, that they really benefit the Ravenswood and surrounding community more than anything, whether it be affordable housing or whether it be a green space that really supports the community. We've seen now, particularly during COVID, how important it is to have outdoor space, and certainly they are deserving of it. So as far as the purchase of the land, is this an outright purchase, or is this a 99-year lease or whatever?
So right now it's contemplated as a lease. We've begun lease negotiations with the landlord. So we're, as soon as this land use action is completed, we plan to hopefully finalize those expeditiously and move forward.
Are there any plans in the work for the current property, the current location? And from a DCAS, DSNY, and then a community perspective, what are we seeing or hearing?
So from the DSNY perspective, and I can speak a bit from the perspective of some of our sister agencies as well, as we discussed very much with council members Constantinides and Van Bramer before, sanitation will vacate the property. We have no ongoing interest there. As soon as we get our new garage, we no longer have use for it. We will transfer responsibility back to DCAS. And one of the ongoing conversations that we're having with the two local members is really putting in place a strong community engagement process to really identify the future use for this property. There's been a lot of interest expressed in affordable housing, very deeply affordable housing, potentially senior affordable housing on this property. That's something that I know the council members have expressed as desperately needed in Western Queens. So I think we want to participate in that process, facilitate it, and let that drive the future use of this site.
So is that part of, do you kind of have a universal process in obtaining, how you obtain implementation, environmental and access around properties? I say that to say I know that there's been a number of new facilities, and each community, each neighborhood is different, but certainly there are universal standards, right, that DSNY has as it relates to environment, but also in terms of usage, future usage. I've seen garages that have closed a decade ago that pretty much are not occupied we would hate to see that. Also, from a Jamaica standpoint, one would expect that DSNY would be the standard for sanitation, waste removal, and if so, what are we expected to see that is kind of state of the art, something out of the norm? Is it going to be green? Is it going to be completely enclosed? What about the odor mitigations and all these things that we all can learn from that then becomes the standard? We have a private waste transfer that sits across the street from a 15-acre park, you know, that is utilized each and every day. You know, while we struggle as a community with that, we would hope that the city is leading in standards and it's something that we can potentially adopt. I know also that Councilmember Constantinides was concerned about access for our young people and the educational component, which on the private side, they've already agreed to such an educational component that we see in communities that were formerly impacted in a very negative way by having these waste transfer facilities or sanitation garages, to be able to see how we transform garbage and really into sustainable usages. And that is something should be shared. And I'd love to figure out how communities could be more, communities can become, particularly our young people, can be more involved in this process, particularly as we talk about sustainability. But really, I just wanted to talk about the standards, and I did watch the PowerPoint, but just to highlight of what you're doing differently from what we may currently see in facilities that may be a decade old. What is kind of next level resources that are being utilized that we may not be familiar with, and that would speak to and highlight safety and sustainability.
Of course. Thank you, Councilmember. And I think the first point I'd make is, and I know that we've had many conversations about the private facilities in your district and in Jamaica. And you know, the notable difference for this facility here is that it is only a garage. It is not a transfer station. So you know, it's a very different use. You don't have any exposed piles of waste or transferring waste from one truck to another. If a truck comes back to this facility full, it's an incidental thing. It's not, it's not a regular basis. Our goal is for the sanitation workers to do their route, go to the transfer station that serves this community, which is down in Long Island City, dump the truck and come back empty. They wash it out on a very regular basis. So the goal is for this to be a very different facility than the ones that you're used to in the Jamaica community. As far as our own environmental analysis, and we have Assistant Commissioner Steve Browdigam here, who's our legal expert and environmental review expert. I would say that sanitation, probably because of our history with litigation, probably has one of the most conservative approaches to environmental review of any agency in the city. We take it very seriously and do a very thorough job looking at the transportation impacts, the air impacts, the noise impacts, many other factors, resiliency, flood impacts, those sorts of things as part of the environmental review process. So we've done a comprehensive assessment of this and identified that there are no significant negative impacts. And to this facility in particular, it is a little bit different from the new Manhattan garages in that it is more of a campus style development than a building. So it is a bit bigger, but this is Queens, that we have the luxury of slightly more space. We don't have to build a structure where trucks are driving on different floors, which is incredibly expensive and difficult to design. But it does have very ambitious sustainability measures included. I think that the most notable ones are the on-site solar on the roof of the building, 390 kilowatts of solar panels, as well as a really comprehensive stormwater collection and treatment system to really make sure that we're not discharging any sort of polluted stormwater or anything of that sort into the adjacent water body. So those are two things that I think are, if not first of their kind for sanitation garages, are certainly at the state of the art. And those are things that we would love to include in all of our projects going forward. There are lots of considerations at play. I think we would love to be building more sanitation garages. We have a number of facilities that are probably in a similar state as the Queens One garage in terms of being undersized and very old and structurally problematic. But we don't get the opportunity to come before this committee very often. So, when we do, obviously we want to put our best project forward, and that's what we feel like we did here.
And finally, will all the trucks be housed indoor?
At this facility, they will not. There is an outdoor parking lot on site, but it is also very far away from the nearest residential use. I don't know the exact distance, but it's probably at least 1,000 feet, the parking lot from the nearest residential use. Steve's shaking his head, so I'm in the ballpark. So it's not like they'll be parked next to people's homes as they are in some of our other garages, unfortunately. So
yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
And one more point I would make, I know everyone loves the idea of enclosed sanitation garages. One of the biggest challenges we have with our facilities is we end up having to use them for a very long time. And the bigger the roof you build, the more expensive it is down the road. So, in some places where it's very close to other uses, very important to have fully enclosed. In other places where we have a little bit more space and can have a buffer with the surrounding uses, outdoor parking is the right way to go from a long-term perspective.
Okay, thank you. So with confirmation from council, if I can get it, that there are no more council member questions.
I see no other council member questions.
Okay, seeing no further questions, this panel is excused. Thank you very, very much for your testimony and your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, council, are there any members of the public wishing to testify?
I see two members of the public here to testify on LU 691, Avi Gross and Tio Chino. Please admit the witnesses to the meeting. Members of the public will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please do not begin until the arms has announced that time has started.
Okay, I now recognize Avi Gross. Please wait for the time.
Starting time.
You may begin.
Hi, Chair Adams. How are you? Thank you for having me. First, I just want to commend you and all the council members for asking all of these questions, which I think are really important. I sometimes humbly get the feeling that public property is given to developers without a thorough inquiry as to exactly what's happening and whether or not this serves the public. So thank you for that. I specifically want to raise with you some concerns. I don't know if you or the council members had a chance to look at the different agreements, the history of this property, who owned it, but there are some legitimate concerns here. Just from what I could see, this was owned by Con Edison, which is a public entity to some extent, and it decided it didn't need it anymore, so it sold it for $15 million to a company called Leicester Creek LLC. And the alarm bells start when it's sold for $15 million, but then very shortly afterwards, Leicester Creek takes out a mortgage for $20 million, Chair Adams, and then another mortgage to yet a third party for $5 million. And then finally, a mortgage to Signature Bank, a fourth party for $10 million and $20 million. Now, this is public property, so I can't say for sure that this is nefarious, but the fact that you have a public entity selling to an LLC for X amount of money, and then suddenly this property is being used to flip it for a profit to multiple other properties, it is concerning. And if I may, I could just, Leicester Creek LLC.
Time expired.
Can I just complete this point, please? Can I complete this point? Chair Adams?
You're on mute.
I can't.
Sorry, yes, you may complete your point.
Thank you so much. So my other concern that I want to share with you is that Leicester Creek LLC and then the Gallon Fund LLC, some of them have information online. You could understand who's running them, but some of them are purposefully very stealthy. And we don't know who's in these LLCs. We don't know what kind of conflicts of interest we might have. And I'm going to complete my point, Chair Adams. I'm not, I don't want, when I come on to give a testimony, I don't want you to grimace and be like, oh, wow, here's that annoying guy. I humbly think, this is a voice that should concern council members. We really need, to make sure that these public properties are carefully vetted, that there are no conflicts of interest, and that the public interest is best served. I know you are a person of integrity, Chair Adams, and I thank you for your time, and please continue protecting the public.
I never grimace when you testify, Mr. Gross, and I thank you for being here, and I thank you for your dedication. Thank you so much. Okay, I now recognize Theo Chino. Please wait for the time.
Starting time.
Thank you, Chairman Adam. Same thing as Mr. Gross. I've been hearing the project and I still hear the same people. HPD, UHAB, and other people involved in this project of solar and things like that. As we have testified previously, and it seems like nobody hears us, they listen, but they don't hear us. UHAB, it's a criminal entity that should not exist the same way Acorn disappeared back in the years. You just took a vote as an example right now. You just took a vote about the cluster on 135th Street given to LHS management. And LHS management basically owns the building of that old woman behind me. She lives at 772 2nd Avenue, and you can see the building is very small. And HLS wants to evict her through the court system so many times that they're in court for so long, they're trying to salvage their building. That's what HLS management is doing. And you just voted 5 seconds ago without asking a single question about how HLS is. And I know my time is going to expire, but I don't know what to do anymore. I can come, say the word, tell you how they are bad entity and things like that, and you don't ask me. You block me on Twitter, Chair Adam. You don't want to hear anything I'm saying, and this is concerning on how future project like this project of DCAS. I lived here in Manhattan where we dealt with that thing. We dealt with the stench. I grew up with the stench of the Riverside Park behind me. So I feel what you're saying about Woodhaven tenant, but are you going to start asking the right question? You are going to be term limited for most of you, and suddenly the project will move on and only us will remember. We need your help. We need
Time expired.
We need your help. On the 19th of this month, we want to do a thing on Times Square to call out the corruption. And we hope that you and all your colleagues will come and join us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you. Council, are there any more members of the public wishing to testify? You have to unmute.
Chair Adams, I see no other members of the public who wish to testify on this item.
Okay. Were there any questions for either witness at this point? From my colleagues? Okay.
I see no,
Questions?
I see no.
These are now excused. Council, are there any further members of the public wishing to testify at this time?
There are no other members of the public here to testify.
There being no other members of the public who wish to testify, the public hearing on LU 691 for application number 200238 PCQ, the DSNY Queens Sanitation Garage is now closed and the item is laid over. That concludes today's business. I remind you that if you have written testimony on today's item, you may submit it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Please indicate the LU number or the project name in the subject hearing. I'd like to thank the applicants, members of the public, my colleagues, subcommittee council, land use staff, and the Sergeants at Arms for participating in today's hearings.